All right, welcome back. Today we're doing my top 5 professional CRT video monitors, and this is going to be in the 13 to 20 inch category, and we're sticking to just analog video for this countdown. So nothing that does 480p or higher. This is only 240p, 480i video, and we're not going into the digital realm, just analog. So these are the kind of CRTs that are really high-end, that cost nearly tens of thousands of dollars back in the 90s and early 2000s. These would have been used in medical facilities, hospitals, and then over in video production for small video editing studios, photography editing studios, anybody that wanted to have really high resolution playback and had some kind of commercial reason to do so. So these CRTs went through their entire life cycle and now at this point have come back in fashion so people can sit around and adjust them. All right, so number 5 on our list is the Sony PVM 40 series. This is a series of monitors that was released in the 1980s and then was produced into the early 1990s. Now, this one has a lot of cool things about it and some drawbacks to it. Let's start off with some of the good things. Now, these have great tubes with really high resolution images when they are dialed in correctly. There are a bunch of different models. The one I want to really specifically highlight as being one of the better ones is this Sony 44Q variant. And the main reason there is because it also supports component video. Now, all of these monitors on this list today are going to support RGB video and composite video and S-video, but sometimes they may not support component video, but this 44 in this whole series does. So if you want to pick out one specifically to look for, there's that. Now, if you go lower on the end of the 40s, so down, if you go down to 4 or 4.1 or 4.2, and it goes up from there, you're going to find maybe less features and a lower resolution tube. But what's the great thing about these? Well, they work great when they're in working condition. They can really produce an awesome image that competes with really any of these CRTs on the list today. It also supports pretty much any region of content you want to use on it, so it doesn't matter where in the world you are or what you're trying to show on it. It pretty much will show an image if it fits within the 15 kilohertz parameter. And let's get over to some of the downfalls of this. Now, this one can be very difficult to even get set up and working right. So I would recommend doing some research on these if you've never looked at one before, because they could be quite tricky. This one is from the era where there was no on-screen service display or no menu available. So there's no real way to see if the CRT is working without sending some type of video signal into the CRT. And not only that, you have to know how to correctly set up the CRT that you can get the image on there and test it out like that. Because there's a lot of push buttons on the front, you could easily have one pushed incorrectly, and that could be the reason you're not getting an image. So a lot of times you'll find these untested. So just do some research, make sure you know how to hook it up so you can test it properly. And another bad part about these is the plastic. Whatever the plastic formula that Sony was using at this time has not held up as well as other plastics on these CRTs. It does tend to be brittle, so you have to watch out. If you are shipping one or getting one shipped, there's always a chance that some of the plastic, especially around the bezel and on the back, will crack and possibly break. Now, it doesn't impact the functionality of the monitor usually, but it does make it look worse. So that's another drawback. Now, maybe the final drawback is going to be the fact that you have to know how to use them and adjust them. They are adjusted from the inside. So if you have to adjust them, it can be a bit dodgy and you need to be careful. I've done quite a few videos on that, so I'll link to some things down below for reference material. But this is one that you have to adjust internally, so that's kind of a drawback where it doesn't have the menu options. So you have to adjust it by taking the shell off, and then you're exposing yourself to really a dangerous situation if you don't know what you're doing. One thing I will mention about these, if you have one that's working, you probably need to get it serviced if it's never been serviced before. These are very good monitors and they tend to have hold up really well over time, but eventually they're all going to need to be serviced just because the parts inside of them are starting to break down. However, I've found many of them to have great long life still left on their flyback transformers and the CRT tube, and of course the deflection yoke, which are like the three primary items that you're worried about for the longevity of the CRT or the whole monitor. So just, don't give up on them. If they start to look good, you start to have issues, please just make sure you get it serviced by a professional, and you can really make these last another 20 plus years based on how you service them. All right, number 4 on my list is the 50 series, and this is a series of CRTs that came out after the series that we just talked about, the 4 series. And one of the biggest advancements on this one was the addition of a service menu. So you get a full adjustment menu on this one, and it just really makes it a lot easier to use. And since it has that service menu, you can easily test if the monitor is even functioning without actually connecting anything to the CRT. So you could power it on and just press the menu button and see if the menu pops up and see if you have an image on the screen, as whereas before you couldn't tell. So that was a big advancement. Again, you could go in and make all adjustments without opening it, which makes it even better. And the 50 series to really look out for, I think, is the 53 series. This would have been more on the medical end. So 5.3 is what you're looking for in either the 13 or the 14 53 or like the 19 or 20 53. The 53 were mostly, again, medical monitors. And the best thing about them is they're the higher resolution tubes for this set of CRTs. And they had a additional RGB/component video input on the back of them, so you could use both of those inputs, where like the 54 series and others only had one single input back there. So if you wanted to run component or RGB into the monitor, you have to switch them on the back side to the BNC ports, whereas this monitor you could just use it simultaneously by using your inputs on the front, switching between them. Again, another awesome high resolution tube from Sony here. Let's talk about the downside of these. Now, the downside of these is they also can need servicing. That's pretty much going to be just about every CRT in this list, almost, is going to need some level of servicing at this point. And the 50 series is no different. There are some capacitors that are known to do things like start to fail and drop red, green, and blue lines into the picture. And if that happens, it's really time for it to get serviced. And there's some other things that you can turn it on and see clearly on the image with geometry problems. Those geometry caps do tend to be failed at this point. But again, it's something that can last a long time if you service it. So we're getting back to the same thing where it needs to be serviced properly. If you see any signs of it starting to fail, or if you know it's been in a rough condition or rough life before you got in touch with it or were given it. So just make sure that you take care of your investment. And again, the 53 would be the creme de la creme of that 50 series. Okay, so up to this point, we've only been highlighting Sony's, and I finally will have a different one for you here. This is a JVC. We have the TMH150C and CG. I think sometimes it has a G on the end, and sometimes maybe not. I'm not sure about every variant on this one. I just know this is a really good analog-only monitor. It actually has a higher resolution tube, up to 750 lines, which is what really differentiates it from these others so far. Now, there's not a 20-inch version of this particular one, but there is this 15-inch, which is a little bit bigger, 1 inch bigger than the other 13 and 14 inches that we would have talked about. So that is another upside. Now, this one does need a card, an external card, and thankfully there's reproductions of this card because it's been reverse engineered and open source created by the community to make those available. And those cards allow you to connect RGB and component video. You don't need those to generally use S-video or composite video on this monitor. Some of the drawbacks for this one, well, I don't know. It's just not a Sony tube if you're really into that. If you don't like Sony tubes and you like more of the bubble feel, it's still got that bubble screen. The next monitor up from this, JVC, that they made would have gone to a flat screen, and I think it started adding digital video support. And this one is becoming a little bit more rarer to find than the PVMs. There just were not as many of these around. There's an Ikegami variant of this CRT also, so Keep an eye out for that. It just looks the same as this one, and it has Ikegami on the front instead of JVC for the most part. They do have a onboard service menu, so that's nice. And there's not really that much negative, I think, to say about it, really. Okay, so that gets us to the top two here. And for number 2 on my list is the L series. Now, don't go crazy. There is an L5 that is not going to be qualified for this list at all, because that one, again, does high resolution video signals and does digital video signals. So what we're talking about here is basically 2 of them, the L2 series and then the L4 series, which is more of a European variant and has the highest resolution tube, I believe, out of all these. I'm not exactly sure all the specifics on the L4, because again, it's not very often available here in the United States. I do believe it had an 800 line tube as far as TV resolution or TV lines on the line count there. And then if you move down from that, the L2 was for the most part a medical monitor, but there were some that were just, again, video production styles. These would have had the last variation of Sony's on-screen display, so the menu is quite a bit different than their last menus as far as functionality. Still get a lot of the great adjustments that you had in the others. And both of these versions of this CRT are going to support both component video and RGB. Don't worry about that. I will tell you that a lot of these are made in the 2000s, early 2000s, and then much later into the mid 2000s. And these ones would need to be the least needing of servicing at this point. I mean, you're getting close to where if you use it a lot, you can consider servicing it. But for the most part, these are still have a lot of good life on them. If they weren't ran really hard, you could still, use them as is a lot of times if they're working when you get them. And some of the L4 does look different. It looks more like the L5 than the L2, so they are both different form factors. There's an L1 that is kind of on the cheaper end, so I really don't want to even bring it up, so we're going to ignore the L1. It's not part of this conversation. It does not do RGB, and so it's not going to be in here. But the L2 and the L4 both have an expansion bay available, so if you want to add an additional card, there are cards you can add to add additional support for extra inputs and video inputs. And again, this is something that there's a lot of cool cards on the secondary market for. That is something that has been reverse engineered, and there's a lot of great alternatives for using this monitor. Now, some of the bad things about this one are going to be there's a bit of a goof in the service menu, and if you don't really adjust it correctly, sometimes if you do horizontal adjustments, your menu will just disappear on you. And so there's a bit of a tweaking there that I don't know what's going on with the software, but it kind of glitches out. It's not really anything wrong with the monitors. Unfortunately, all of them do it, but if you know what you're doing, you can work that. I'm not going to explain that here in this top 10 or top 5 list, sorry. But there is that flaw. There's also some plastic brackets inside of these PVMs that goes bad and cracks and brittles and falls apart from the inside. So if you hear a lot of rattling inside, it's because those brackets have probably broken down. Good thing is there's replacements available for that too on the secondary market. I do have a history of a lot of people complaining about the linearity on this set. So if you get into the larger ones, like the 19 or 20 inch variant of this, I have had people complain about the linearity, and it's just kind of a thing that's with this CRT. It doesn't exactly look great on side scrollers compared to maybe the other ones on the list. And I don't know, maybe that's just something that was with the newer design and architecture of this one. Because this L series is the last one that Sony made before they went to a flat screen, all digital, anti-CRT kind of display. All right, before I get to my number 1 analog pro video CRT, I want to say thanks for watching all this list. I've really worked hard to put this together for you, and please know that every single clip that you've seen is from my archives of CRTs I've serviced here in my CRT shop over the last 4 years. So if you're interested at all in getting your CRT serviced, I do have a full restoration shop, and there's more information available at the top of the description of the video. It's for my Patreon. That's the only way you can get things worked on. My shop is in Virginia in the United States. And so if you want to somehow get your CRT to me, there's more information below in that description. And thank you to anybody who's ever sent in a CRT. There's a very good possibility there are some people that are watching this video that are actually seeing their CRTs that have been serviced. Again, this footage is all from my archives, and it was a lot of it has never been used or seen the light of day. So I hope you enjoyed it, and let's get to the #1 CRT on my list. Well, we finally made it here to the #1 CRT on my list, and if you've been following along through the whole list, you may guess that the #1 is the M series, because it's the only one I haven't talked about yet. So on the highest end of the M series, you get the M4U. This one actually had a higher resolution tube, so 800 TV lines on there, which does produce a little bit sharper of an image. Now, the one drawback for this higher resolution tube was you only got support of one single RGB slash component video input on the input board. Sony also made M series that were M2s or MDUs that had that additional input, but those were only with the 600 line tubes, so not as high resolution as the 800 line tubes. But the medical variants, which again would have been the M2 MDUs or like something similar to that, you can tell the medical variants are a little bit different looking. Just check on the back. If it has two sets of inputs there for RGB and component, then you know it's that 600 line version that is the medical variant. That's really the two top ones, so that's kind of like a tie for me on which one's the better one. Personally, I like the medical variants better with that additional input as opposed to just that little bit higher resolution on the video. I think that they all look awesome between 600 and 800 lines to me. I don't have much of a difference in visually seeing that difference, but technically the M4s are better. The M series again has an awesome menu that has really been flushed out and worked well. I thought it was the peak menu for all these Sonys, because right after this they went to the L series, which I just talked about. Just not my favorite menu series or service menu of all of them. I felt like this M series was just perfect. It was like they had really flushed out a lot of the great things about the design that was even dating back to the 40 series, and it went through the 50 series, and it got to the M series, and I felt like that was the best of what they were able to do. Now, there are some drawbacks to the 50 series, the M series, just like the 50 series. You pretty much have the same kind of problems with capacitor breakdown because the boards are very similar in design, so you have to be mindful of that. If you do actually try to service these boards yourself, they are quite difficult to work on, these and the 50 series. They both have double-sided boards with small components on each side, and so it's very easy to damage a trace or something and not even be able to see it visually, and you could have all kinds of problems when you plug your CRT back together and try to do some adjustments. You may have no image, you may have some other image, so these are very much not easy to troubleshoot if there's a serious issue. And so that's the real biggest drawback, is just the fact that if you don't have them serviced, they may have something catastrophic happen, and then it would be very difficult sometimes to even be able to use or diagnose the problems properly, because these were more complex, lots of components on there, so they do have some ghosts in them or something that, you know, can knock them out if you're not careful. But the M series wins for me. I love it. And just to give you a special tip here, I didn't mention this brand, but there's another brand called Olympus that many of you know about. There's the OEV series, and there is there's a couple I'm going to mention here. First, it's the 142 and the 202. Now, this is a 13 and 19 inch or 14 and 20 inch version of the 50 series. They're going to be medical only, so they're like the 53s. So if you see these, they are really awesome, but just make sure they're the 142s or the 202, and then you can also get the 143 or the 203, and those are the M series variants. Now, these were all four of these monitors were really just made by Sony, and then Olympus bought them and just slapped their color scheme and logo on the front, and they are the same exact builds as, again, those ones I just compared them to. So I know the numbers can be tricky. You also want to be on the lookout for anything before the 142. So if you see a 1 or a 0 or something at the end of the number sequence, take a close look at it, because those are actually Panasonic monitors, not Sony's, and not the ones on this list, okay? So that's not the same CRT. Just stick to the ones on the list. I'll have a full breakdown in the description of this video listing each one of these, and so you could just cheat and have gotten to any one of the numbers here and not watch the full video. But that's going to be it. That's my full list of the top 5 analog only CRTs. Let me know, what did I miss out here? I know I didn't talk about any of the Panasonics or barcodes or who knows what. Remember, this does not include CRTs that are like computer displays. We're just talking about the professional video monitors that were analog, no digital stuff. But that's my list. What's your list? Leave it in the comments below. See you next time with some more retro content.